All right, so are you ready to dive into this BC election? It's a real nail-biter. We're digging into a global news article that's calling it a knife edge. And they're not exaggerating.
It's not every day you see an election this close.
Definitely not. It's like every single vote is holding its breath.
Absolutely. It really highlights how much each vote matters. Even with polls predicting a tight race, this level of suspense is something else.
You got that right. Late Saturday night, and neither the NDP nor the Conservatives could pull off a majority.
It's incredible, isn't it? A real cliffhanger.
Tell me about it. The NDP are clinging on to 46 seats.
And the Conservatives are hot on their heels with 45.
You practically need a scorecard to keep up.
It's these close calls that make politics so fascinating.
And so unpredictable.
Exactly. A minority government throws a whole new wrench into the works. Neither party can go it alone.
So what are we looking at here, coalitions?
Potentially. We could be in for some serious legislative gridlock.
And maybe even another election sooner than anyone expected.
It's definitely on the table. Remember, this was supposed to be an easy win for the NDP after last year's predictions.
Right. Instead, they're barely holding on.
And they even lost 3 of their own cabinet ministers in the process.
Talk about a turn of events. Who are we talking about here?
Well, first, you've got Rachna Singh, the education minister.
Okay.
Then there's Nathan Cullen, the Minister of Water, Land, and Resource Stewardship.
Right.
And to top it off, Pam Alexis, the agriculture minister, also lost her seat.
Wow. That's a blow to the NDP. And to add insult to injury, the Conservatives swept through Surrey and the Fraser Valley.
Areas that are typically considered NDP strongholds.
So what happened? Did the NDP get complacent, or did the Conservatives really strike a chord with voters?
It's probably a bit of both, to be honest. The Conservatives really hammered home their message on issues like crime, the drug crisis, and the cost of living.
Issues that are definitely on people's minds these days.
Exactly. The question is, did voters buy into their solutions, or were they just expressing their frustration with the current situation?
It's hard to say for sure, but one thing's for certain. This election was anything but ordinary. I mean, first you have Kevin Falcon, the leader of the BC United Party, bowing out unexpectedly. Then we see this surge in support for the Conservatives. And to top it all off, a record number of independent candidates, 40.
That's unheard of.
It's got to be a sign of voter discontent.
That's absolutely. And these weren't just random names on the ballot. Many of them were former BC United MLAs.
Really?
Some chose not to join the Conservatives, and some weren't invited.
Interesting.
It really makes you think about the state of our political landscape.
It does. So let's talk about the Conservatives' platform. What were they proposing that got everyone's attention?
Well, their platform was all about change. They were proposing things like scrapping the carbon tax and putting an end to drug decriminalization.
Big changes.
Right. They also wanted to end the Safe Supply program and even suggested privatizing some aspects of healthcare.
Wow, they weren't afraid of shaking things up.
Not at all. They really went after the NDP on issues like crime, the drug crisis, and affordability.
They were saying the NDP wasn't doing enough.
Precisely. They were arguing that the NDP simply wasn't doing enough to address these issues.
Those are some pretty bold moves, and I'm sure they sparked some heated debates.
Oh, absolutely.
But did these stances resonate with voters, or did they backfire?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. Some of those issues are really important to people.
They are, and some of the solutions proposed by the Conservatives, like getting rid of SOGI 123.
The anti-bullying program in schools.
Yes, that one. Well, that generated a lot of controversy, to say the least.
Rightfully so.
It's hard to say for sure how these more extreme positions played out in the election.
It's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds. So no clear majority. Looks like we're headed for a minority government situation here. What does this mean for BC?
Well, we've been down this road before.
We have.
Remember 2017, the NDP formed a minority government with support from the Greens.
Oh, right. With the Greens. So are we thinking NDP Green reunion tour?
It's possible, but here's where things get interesting. Sonia Furstenau.
The Green Party leader.
Exactly. She lost her seat.
Oh, wow. No kidding.
So it's hard to imagine the Greens having much bargaining power without their leader in the legislature.
That's true. That really changes things. So what do you think? Are we looking at another election soon, or could the Conservatives still pull something off?
Another election is always a possibility, but I'd say it's highly unlikely the Conservatives could form a government.
Really?
The NDP are just a few seats shy of a minority government.
That's true.
And even if the Conservatives manage to flip a couple more seats, it's hard to see them getting enough support from other parties to actually govern.
Because their platforms are just too different.
Exactly. Their policies are just too far apart. It would be really difficult to bridge that gap.
It sounds like every single vote in those tight races is going to be crucial.
Absolutely. Every vote counts.
But beyond the numbers game, I'm curious about the leaders themselves. This was both AB and Rustab's first time leading their parties into an election.
It was a baptism by fire for both of them.
Right. So how did they do? How did they handle the pressure?
Well, AD really projected that image of steady, experienced leadership,
Yeah,
emphasizing the NDP's track record, their vision for the future. Rostad, on the other hand, really went all in on change,
he did, yeah.
tapping into those anxieties around the economy and public safety.
It felt like this campaign got a bit, well, spirited at times. Did it feel to you like things got a little too personal between the two sides?
I think that's fair to say. This election definitely saw a level of negativity and divisive rhetoric that we don't often see in BC politics.
For sure.
Both the NDP and the Conservatives resorted to some pretty personal attacks.
Yeah?
Fear-mongering tactics, trying to paint each other as extreme and dangerous.
So did it work? Does going negative actually sway voters, or does it just leave people feeling cynical and disengaged?
It's a tough one.
It is.
I mean, political scientists have been debating this for years.
Right.
Some say that negative campaigning can be effective, especially when it reveals real problems or hypocrisies. But others argue it just creates cynicism and apathy
Yeah.
and ultimately harms the democratic process.
That's a tough nut to crack.
Uh-huh.
But regardless of who wins, in the end, it feels like BC is in for some uncertainty.
Oh, absolutely. A minority government relies on compromise and finding common ground.
Right.
Whether the NDP can make that work with the Greens or maybe even some of those independent MLAs, that's the big question mark.
So reading between the lines here, it sounds like BC voters sent a message with this election: get your act together.
Right.
No more business as usual.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. This election showed us some deep divisions in the province, but it also highlighted how important respectful dialogue is
Yeah.
and finding solutions that work for everyone.
Well, there you have it. We took a deep dive into an election that's still too close to call. No clear winner. Just a lot of possibilities and a big question mark hanging over BC's future.
It reminds us that in politics, like in life, things change. Staying informed, challenging what we think we know, and most importantly, making our voices heard are crucial.
It seems those easy answers are still out there somewhere. But one thing's for sure, Ariane, BC politics are about to get very interesting.
Absolutely.
We'll be watching closely to see how it all unfolds, what it means for the province. Until then, stay curious.